Okay, now it shows we're back. What the heck? Well, that wasn't me. That was just the stream just died. It said stream dismissed. Hey guys, I'll give everybody a minute to get back. My screen went gray and it said stream ended on a gray overlay on the YouTube side. The software on my computer was still showing streaming, and this was apparently a YouTube thing. And just put a quick comment here. YouTube thing. Okay, I'll leave it. Wow. Well, that was certainly annoying. Yeah, everybody, the stream just died. That was not anything anybody did. YouTube lost the stream for some reason. We're back. And I just dripped water on my model. That's why you clear coat them. That's Berthold's airplane. Rudolf Berthold was a one-handed ace. He lost a hand in combat, and after he could have been medically retired, but he went ahead and stayed in and kept fighting. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Yep, that's it. Stupid YouTube. Then again, without him, we wouldn't be doing this at all. So you take the good with the bad. Give everybody a chance to sign back in. Looks like we have most everybody back here already. I don't know if that's going to happen again. Every once in a while, YouTube just croaks. And they've been having more trouble lately also. One of the things is that I think some of the commercial and ad software and everything that they use has caused some, depending on who you want to believe, has caused some problems. But I had somebody recently told me they couldn't see one of my videos, and I went and opened up, and apparently, I guess the server that was working in that area was having issues. Hey, John, glad you made it. So anyway, so for everybody that's just checking in, YouTube just died on me there for a second. And there we go. So we're back. So let's, as I was saying before, I was so rudely interrupted by the interweb, the interrupt web. The Atlantis boys are putting this moonship back in, and I only grabbed it just because I was thinking that was something I might get just to put it on, just to have fun with. And I'm glad to see that they're keeping these old kits going. Again, the kind of thing that I never would have. Yeah, correct, Chris. Everybody lost us. The YouTube, it died on me, and it literally just said stream ended. Go or dismiss, and I was like, whoa, dismiss. I don't want to end the stream, but it did. It took me a while to get it reconnected. To get past the 80, okay, that makes sense. Tabby, the orange Tabby, saying that they're testing stuff to get past the ad blockers. That makes perfect sense. That would explain some of the trouble. And people I know said they can't watch my videos, and I know some of my videos were shadow banned because they were on the shooting sports. My old Captain Max's Fun with Guns channels, I did about 60 videos on that and just quit doing it because I was getting viewership of 10, 12, 25. And they were like, oh yeah, the minute you put up a gun video, unless you're like one of their established people like Ian over at Forgotten Weapons, who has a huge following, they make sure the algorithm doesn't see you. So this channel hasn't that much trouble, but that's one reason I don't put tags, and that's one reason the channel doesn't grow, because the minute you put something like World War II, they see the word war, and all of a sudden, they try to suppress you. And I used to have I have a channel, Maxsmodels, on BitChute, but it's still a nascent operation, really slow. So although they don't can anything, they don't do all the stuff that YouTube does, but you got to be patient with them. But I think there are some other systems under development that are going to be a competitor for YouTube that don't do the stuff YouTube does. I think they're, I don't know, maybe creating their own demise, but they're probably watching me right now. That's why the channel dropped. So anyway, in other more modelly stuff, I got a lot of questions about molding lately, and I did a little bit of research, and one of the questions I got was, I actually got a lot of questions from Alan over the Red Caboose. He was asking about gates and things, and So, and I just told him some of the stuff I just didn't know. Well, here's a couple of things. I found a great channel from a company on plastic molding, and I think this is we're going to get into the weeds a little bit here, but all right. First off, as I've told you before that the sprue is where the plastic is injected, is what into the mold. Okay. So what we have with all of our parts on it are actually runner trees or runners. Then you have, he was asking about the gate. Now the gate is actually this little tab on the end that is the part that you snip off. And what happens is, and by the way, that Vostok I just worked on, apparently they didn't understand the concept of a gate on that when they molded it, because basically the entire runner just went into the part, so they had to clip off this big chunk of plastic and file it all down to try and fit. It was a royal pain. So obviously what model companies do is they put this narrow area where you can snip it off, and that's the gate. That's where the heated liquid styrene actually goes into the mold and leaves you a place you can snip the part off of the runner. So the sprue is the feed, the runner is the actual tree that we get as a runner tree, even though everybody calls them sprue trees, are actually runner trees. Normally the sprue is not included in the kit. They got into some pretty esoteric stuff here about the sucker pins. Because don't forget, you have to have some suction to make sure that the liquid plastic is going to fill all the void area. And of course that leaves a small sucker pin. And where you put that sucker pin has a lot to do with how evenly and properly the mold is going to be filled. But they went into some other stuff that I hadn't thought about. Now, the part sticking up is the sprue, and of course you have the tree, and this is referred to as an unbalanced mold. And the reason this mold is considered unbalanced is because from the sprue, the liquid styrene has to travel farther to the outer pieces than it does to the inner pieces. And this causes a litany of problems, not the least of which is pressure-related problems. And they actually had some math formulas in here. Pressure is absolutely critical, as well as temperature and the composition of the styrene and a lot of it. It turns out there's a lot more to this than I had realized. Now, this is a naturally balanced channel runner because every part, you have the exact same distance between the sprue and the part. If you look and measure it, the liquid styrene moves the exact same distance to any one of those 8 parts. Now, if you don't want to do it this way, there's a way to artificially balance it. If you'll notice on this one, you got the sprue. The runner is thicker on the inner parts than it is on the outer parts. And that naturally balances out the pressure as the styrene moves into the parts. If any of you guys are familiar with the old Liberty ships or Victory ships that had those triple expansion steam engines, they'd have the high pressure one, then it would recapture the steam and use a mid pressure one, and the pistons got bigger because the steam had lost a lot of energy. Well, this is kind of the reverse of that. A lot of liquid styrene can move through that tube, but when it hits the constraint for the extended tube, it's the same size as the constraint for the other tubes, and it balances out the pressure. They're traveling further, but the pressure stays balanced, and that's really, really critical. The main time you would do this, obviously, is when you're producing nearly identical parts on a multiple the same thing. Like when Pete Vetri was telling me that, like with the clear acrylic parts, they'll do what they call 4-up or 8-up, where they actually have 8 of them in a single mold, and they get 8 windshields out of one mold. Now, this also can help explain, because no matter how carefully they cut the molds, they're never going to be perfectly identical. which can help explain sometimes the acrylic parts or the clear parts, why you'll buy two of the same model and one windshield will fit better than the other, because one of them may have come out of a slightly better mold. Now, this gets to be a really, really, really big deal when you're dealing with designing the runner tree. What parts are going to go on? All of us have probably wondered, how come they don't put all the parts that go on one section of the model together on the same runner? It would make life so much easier. Like, all of the wing parts are together and all of the tail parts are together, all the land. But we're always searching all over the runner tree trying to find these parts to make one sub-assembly. And it turns out this has a lot to do with it. They have to do a lot of math on cutting the mold to figure out what parts to go on what tree to keep all the pressure balanced as the styrene goes in. And I would imagine that helps explain why you see this weird combination of big and small parts on the same tree that seem to have no relationship to each other. And it gets into void space and other things like that, and the pressure that's required. It made me appreciate, there's one other thing I learned. One of the reasons we tend to get the rectangular or trapezoidal runner trees is apparently, and haven't quite wrapped my head around why this is the case, but you can have all of the runner channels cut on one side. But if you use a circular mold, then you have to cut identical channels on both sides. I'm not 100% sure what the rationale behind that is, but we're looking at a little bit of Bernoulli's principle in here. Same thing that makes an airplane wing fly. When that styrene starts moving, you have to have the right amount of pressure, the right amount of temperature, the right viscosity. And they actually got into that in some detail. And you know what I think I'm going to do is when we're done with this, when we are done with this live stream, I'm going to see if I can find that website and put a link there, so that you guys, because they go into a lot of great detail about it, you guys can answer a lot of your questions. Let me just put this to fit the screen. There we go. So that was what I had on that. But there's more. Now, I happen to have a little text here that I'm going to just read to you. For those who don't know, the injection molder machine actually has a gigantic screw. You have the hopper on top of the plastic pellets. They drop down into what looks like a giant, well, it is basically a giant jack screw. And it's got these, they call them tapes, but they're basically circular heating elements on it to warm it up to get the plastic melt. But also the pressure and the grinding motion also helps what they call plasticize, which we think of liquefy the styrene. Then it gets pushed into a chamber at the head of the jack screw, which is preloaded, and you got to have it set to the exact temperature and the exact quantity of plastic or styrene or medium and everything. So getting these machines set up in itself changes with every single freaking mold, and you got to do test shots to make sure you got it right. So this is why they tend to run batches of thousands of one thing at a time, because it is not a small deal to reset these machines up. And fortunately, when you have bad shots, because you haven't got it right, you can just throw them, they can be reground and thrown back in the hopper. But anyway, then of course, once that heated up plastic gets up front and I guess you call it the preloaded shot is in the chamber ready to go, then a hydraulic ram pushes the thing forward. That forces the plastic through all the runners. And yes, the molds do have cooling holes in them, just like a liquid cooled engine. So once it gets in there, and you've got the little sucker holes, a little negative pressure pulling the stuff as well as the ram pushing it. So that's one reason it flows so well. Then of course you got to put the fluid through to cool it. That is the longest part of the process, is the cooling process. And by long, I'm thinking 20, 30 seconds, something like that. But that's kind of your, I don't know if I call it the weak sister, but anyway, that's the time consuming part. But then something new happens I had never thought about before. About 35% on average of the medium of the styrene is in the runner, which goes in the box. Companies could save themselves a lot of material cost if they had a way to trim all the parts off, drop them in the box, bag them or something, and put the runners back in to be reground. That could save them a lot of cost. It could probably save them a quarter of their material cost. To this day, no one has figured out how to do that economically, because basically that would take hand labor, everything, and no mold exists that's self-cutting or anything. It's just the technology probably isn't worth pursuing. It's easier and cheaper just to go ahead and lose the medium. But if somebody ever perfected an economic way to clip the part, to pre-clip the parts so that the runners could go back into the grinder, that would save a lot of medium and a lot of cost. So there's that. And again, it talks about the cooling, that the tool remains closed until the plastic has completely cooled and hardened in the mold tool, and this is usually the longest portion of the injection molding process. The ejection molding is performed by back moving the screw, which also is probably, I imagine, what refills with medium, which opens the plastic part. It's ejected, and next the tool closes, and the process is repeated. And the cooling process occurs simultaneously with packing, holding pressure, and filling processes. So that time doesn't go to waste. While the mold is shut and the liquid's going through cooling the styrene and deplasticizing it, the pressure still being held on the next medium. It's coming back, it's reloading. So it's kind of like an automatic. When you fire it, as the bullet's going down the barrel, it's still extracting the empty case, stripping a new round off the magazine and putting it in the chamber. So things are happening while that process is taking place. And this article gets in on the screw antechamber is melted plastic material, which is an amount measured equal to the amount of plastic needed for the injection mold. Like I said, it has to be, the antechamber has, at the beginning of the ram, has to be set up with the right amount. But as it points in here, the process begins after plastic has reached the appropriate temperature to achieve, and here's something we don't think about, shrinkage balance, and pressurization is applied to the process. Don't forget that this plastic, as it's cool, is going to shrink a little bit, so that has to be factored in. And which is one of the reasons that has to actually be factored into the making of the mold. And this really gets into it. It says there's about 270 degrees, goes on getting into the nuts and bolts of it. But I've been getting a fair amount of questions just recently about the plastic process, and so I started boning up on it. And I knew the basics. And then when you talk about like the George Toda side slide method, which I don't think he invented, because I believe that was actually used in other fields of endeavor before it got into styrene. But Toda, having been in the aluminums business before, I think he had experience with that. So he's the one that brought it over to kit models. That's why we have these beautiful car bodies and everything that are so complex and have the sides already molded into place. We don't have to glue the sides on like the old polymer kits. And I still to this day I say that Toda, this industry owes as much to George Toda as it does to anybody for having made the industry what it is today. He really helped advance the state of the art. And the work he did over at Lindbergh, he really made them a serious model company when he took over there. I used to think the mold was the heat sink, and it's not. It actually has liquid cooling tubes in it, and you have to, or else you'd be sitting there for minutes or longer instead of 20 seconds, 30 seconds. My understanding, I've heard different stories that a mold can crank out 2 units a minute, and I've heard 1 unit a minute, and I think it depends on how big the thing is and what you're making. Probably smaller is quicker, would be my assumption. And a mold operator, it's as much science as it is art. But I wanted to get into that a little bit because I had a lot of people asking me about it, and we, like I say, when I'm done here, I'll try and find that page and tack a link on, so you guys can take a look at it. It's both interesting and boring at the same time. You start getting in the numbers, temperatures, but it does demystify how this stuff works. And because when you look at a press machine from the outside, you can't tell what's what because everything's covered up, obviously. And yeah, that thing's under a lot of pressure, and I've never heard of one exploding, but nothing would surprise me. Now, if you look down here on the little desk cam, let me enlarge this a bit. I'll tell you what, let me put this on top where you guys can see it better. There we go. And just move that over just a little bit so you can see my smiling face. All right, time to talk about the little Revell kits I've been working on, and this is Rudolf Berthold's D7, and you see that little insignia on the side, the little sword with the F on top. It wasn't until 5 minutes before I started this video I realized that I put it on backwards. Those actually face different directions, and the open end of the handle is supposed to face forward. Oops, sorry. But Berthold was famous because not only did he have like 44 victories, but he lost a hand about halfway through his career, and he just said, "Nope." You know, like Douglas Bader, the famous World War II ace that flew with a couple of wooden legs. He went back into combat and got another 16 victories, essentially flying one-handed. And it's amazing that a guy that survived all of that would be killed just 2 years later in political street violence. He was shot while putting down some kind of a riot. A lot of people don't appreciate what a mess Germany was after World War I. Well, anyway, the way I'm going to be displaying these is I'm working on. I have the other third Fokker on the desk right now, getting worked on. This is a completely naked build, the way I built them as a kid. And what I want to do is the one in the box art is this one. This is Jack Linwood art. This is, as you guys are probably tired of hearing me talk about, this, let's see if I can get the glare off of it. Okay, this is the original comp by Jack Linwood. Might do better if I just hold it up here. Nope, that's no better. I'm reflecting the screen. You can see I have multiple screens up so I can monitor what I'm trying to do during the live stream. Well, anyway, this is the original comp done by Jack Linwood, which was turned in with little modification, was turned into this box art. Okay, and as I mentioned before, that the comps, and this is the actual comp, so you can see how small it is, the size of it. And I managed to purchase this from the Craig Cadera estate. You know, may Craig rest in peace. Great model guy. So anyway, then they would make the big painting, and this is gouache watercolors. I'm not sure what I'm assuming the big one was also, but somebody pointed out, and I didn't bring it in here, but if you look at the SE5 box art versus the comp, and I can grab a picture of the comp. I don't think I have to. On the wheel on the comp, there is a red circle around it. It has a red interior, and for whatever reason, I guess it was Goldstein, the guy who was the head of Revell's art department, said, "No, I don't like that. Let's make it white." So in that one, the comp is different than the comp is different than the actual artwork that went on the box. But also, you might notice, and I pointed this out before, that this is the same Fokker D7 that is in the background here, and that's Hermann Goering's airplane, and which is, of course, the same Fokker D7 that was put on the box art of the Fokker model. Keeping with Linwood's, I think he was creating a basically a historically accurate universe. And I thought that was just a nice tie-in that the two box arts, sort of are... Come on, Max, you can do better now. Let's get it up here. That the two box arts are tied in together. To me, that's just, maybe I'm just a little too nerdy, but to me, that's just cool. Now, The way I plan to display each of these models, the SE5 and the D7, is real quick note: the old original kits that came in these boxes all came with stands. Okay, this kit, although, and I took some pictures of it, it is the exact same pressing, the exact same molding. They were even still in white plastic, but they made a minor modification to the mold. They got rid of the stand on the new reissue and plugged the hole in the bottom that the you see, this does not have the hole in the bottom for the stand that this one has, where the stand mounts. And I mean, there's not even a facility for it. Oh, by the way, another quick note on Berthold's airplane. I knew I did make a mistake getting that decal backwards, but some of the pictures show that the underwing area, the fuselage, being olive drab. But Berthold apparently had more than one airplane, and one of them apparently was red and blue like this, and the other had a green section under the wing. Haven't been able to determine which was the earlier version and which was the later. So anyway, but the way I intend to display them is up on the shelf will be the box art beside the comp with a naked model with nothing but decals on it like this, because this is because it's the way I built them as a kid. I never had money for paints, and I quite frankly don't think my parents liked the idea of cutting me loose with paint inside my bedroom, because they didn't want to find it all over the floor and the wall and the furniture, which is exactly where it would have ended up. My parents were smart, so I want to build a completely naked one, which not only kind of in honor of building the way I did as a kid, but also it shows you the actual raw naked kit. This is what you got. I know some people like to lay out one still on the sprue trees, and you know, I get it, but I personally prefer to have the model built. But this also allows you to see all the parts. Then there'll be one, you know, with a nice paint job, more detailed, and a third one which will be painted to match the box art. So the one I'm working on now is kind of look like this one, because this is Goering's airplane. So it will look like this, except it'll have details like the engines, guns, pilot, and wheels painted. So it'll have the details added in there, but both of them are going to look pretty similar. The SE5 kind of the same way. The SE5, I've already got the one up that's just in the little khaki color that came in. And hindsight being 2020, that was a reissue of the model. That was actually stamped in a sort of a khaki color. The older ones were actually in a dark green, because they probably knew kids didn't have a lot of money for paint. And this way you can actually make one without painting it that kind of looks like what's on the box. But still, I'm just going to leave the khaki one naked. So it's mainly so you can see how the parts are, all the parts in it. Then I'm painting one kind of a greener color. I'm calling it a greener green for the RAF markings, and then I'm going to put American markings on the one that's olive drab, which is the one that I saw when I was at the Fort Rucker Museum, and I found a couple of pictures of. And it's just an SE5. They had a different designation for it, but it's an American markings. It pretty much looks like the British one. We even had similar tail flashes because both our colors are red, white, and blue. So anyway, that's how I plan to display them. There'll be 3 airplanes in front of the Fokker and the SE5A, and then the others will probably just have one each. And I've got several camels, but the only what I might do possibly, because somebody sent me those beautiful little Academy kits, and I got to be honest with you, I've been fairly impressed with Academy kits. They're almost too detailed for 1/72 scale. That Stuka, I mean, it had the decals for the they go on the side of the antenna this way for 1/72 scale antenna, and I'm in there looking like I'm doing brain surgery, and I got them on, which still amazes me. But so far, my impression Academy kits out of Korea are actually, they're quite good. I am not disappointed with them, and so that's where we're sitting on the World War I aircraft. Now, I'm trying to paint the pilots, but at 1/72 scale, basically all I'm getting is a black pilot with a flesh face and a couple of little silver dots over the goggles, and going, yep, good enough. Thank you, Lance. If you read Lance's last comment, just remember, you can't unread it. Don't chicka wow 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 wow. Oh man, I did not just go there. So anyway, okay, I just took this picture before I came in here, so I haven't had time to download it. So where is it? I'm oh huh, yeah. Let's see how this works. There's the pilot blown up a little bit. But that wasn't really what I wanted to show you. You can sort of see the silver on the goggles there. Anyway, what I was going to show you was, as I told you, I rigged the SE5, the cabane struts. I mounted them, and then I plucked the upper wing off so I could get to the cabane struts. But then when and everything went fine, but when I using the easy line, but when I went to remount them, somehow they drifted out of place. So I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to mount the wing and try to do them. And that skinny easy line is argumentative as the day is long. It took me about 15 minutes to get one line in place. And I can't really see that, can you? There's one line, one diagonal. Now what I thought I would do, I kind of outsmarted myself. What I thought I would do with the cabane struts is get a long piece of easy line and tie it off on one anchor corner, right? And touch glue, let it harden. And then I would just like string it around so I wouldn't have to keep tying off each point. Just go around and around and just zigzag pattern the whole thing. And so basically one long line going all the way around. Well, the problem is that super thin easy line is, it's like black magic. It was fighting me all the way. It won't, you try to put it someplace, and like when you get close to where you want to put it, it just curves out of the way. Like it knows you want it to go there and it disobeys. It's basically like a disobedient child. Now don't get me wrong, the stuff is great, but you got to remember that I'm working, you know, at this scale, trying, and it's where a 1/16 of an inch matters. And I finally got it anchored one point and got it wrapped around another. So the technique will probably work, but my cunning plan to make this easy was an utter failure. I think it'll work, but it's not going to be easy. And part of it is that the little pointy tools I have, like little pointy tweezers, tend to slip out of place. They don't really grab it very well. And the bigger stuff is like trying to do surgery with a shovel. Yes, it is super tedious. I just want to do one SE5 that way. This is more of can I do it? It's strictly a goal, a ludicrous goal I have set for myself. But this is way worse than rigging the Felix stove, because as much that was a matter of complexity of rigging, but everything was big enough for the most part you could deal with it. This is strictly a matter of tiny size and very difficult to get it to cooperate. But if I get it done, that model's going on the shelf under glass, vacuum sealed, so that archaeologists can find it in the future and go, this guy must have had some patience. I have to admit, though, there is absolutely an undescribable joy in just putting one of those together the way I did as a kid. And I'm sure nostalgia is the fuel that drives that, but I'm getting such a kick out of these World War I airplanes. My problem is I'm not the most patient guy on earth, which is definitely not a good quality for a model builder. But what I like is that like the Berthold D7, it looks good at a distance, and I'm happy with it. You look up close, the blemishes show very quickly. There's a lot of inaccuracies in the pattern on the bottom. I was mixing my own colors, and when I would run out, I would try to remix another color, and of course, it never quite matched. But I figure, first off, you're not really going to see it that much, and I mean, I don't think anybody's going to come to my house and count the lozenge pattern on bottom and go, I'm sorry, you have too many of that color, and that color is inaccurate. And so, the other thing is that I came up with a really bad idea. I don't know if you guys remember the Renwall Aero skins, where they literally had the skin you would glue to the airplane so you didn't have to paint it. But I had considered the possibility of making it, and I think some people do make them. They made the lozenge pattern. In fact, here, I took this so you could see it. They made the lozenge pattern. I'm like, and I'm sure putting the color in it would have been a substantial extra cost. And by the way, those are bigger than the wings. You have to file some of it off when which I guess it's good that they made it a little bigger than the wing, so that you just once you get it in place, you have to file it off. But and it like I say, it's paint by numbers, and it really is. Once I started doing it, I was kind of enjoying myself. So it is like the rigging. It is tedious, but it kind of looks cool when you're done. So you're like, yeah, it's actually kind of fun. But there is a pattern, and they give you a copy of that pattern that there's the actual airplane. And of course, this is Berthold's airplane. And there's really only about 4 or 5 colors. I think there's 4 colors to it. And it actually does follow a pattern. So it's not quite as hard as I made it out to be. If I would, but I should have gotten this before I gotten started. I found this after I'd already finished the model. And today we really have no excuse for not making 5 minutes on the internet. When I saw all these patterns cut, I thought, okay, well, I guess I'm supposed to put a different color in every one. And it's hard to do that and not have the same colors touch. And look at this and I was, oh, wait a minute, the same colors do touch. Look, there is a pattern to it. And once you learn the pattern, it goes a lot quicker. So shame on me for not doing 10 minutes worth of research. And, oh well, lesson learned. If I get another one, I'll do it that way. With all of the talk about Japanese aircraft, to totally shift gears now in mid-sentence, we've been talking about Japanese aircraft a lot lately. And I thought this would be an interesting to bring up because I got to wondering about this. I pulled off that Marusan kit, that one of them that I believe Mr. Hamilton had sent to me. And it's of, I forget which fighter, but I realized, when you say Japanese fighter, everybody, of course, obviously thinks of the Zero. It was their most produced fighter with over 10,000 of them made. By the way, these are Wikipedia numbers, so don't hold me responsible if I'm off. But I started realizing something, and I actually realized that there are a lot more of other fighters than there were the Zero. Of course, the Zero was in at the beginning of the war. Before the beginning of the war, and it fought to the very end. And once you get it was at Pearl. So once you get that, the first year of the war, it's the primary airplane we were fighting because we were mostly fighting their Navy, and that was their primary fighter. So you tend to think of the Zero when somebody says Japanese fighter, but realistically, Mitsubishi only fielded 2 frontline fighters during the war that were made in any significant numbers. Well, that's not true. I don't think I have the A5M Claude, which actually did see service as a fixed gear airplane. But anyway, these they made the Raiden, which was a great high altitude airplane, was a terror of the B-29s. But it was actually the bulk of the fighters are made by Nakajima. And if you add up all the different the 4 different primary fighters that Nakajima put out, it goes way past the less than 12,000 that Mitsubishi made. Don't forget, the Nakajima also made the Roof fighter, which was the Zero on floats, and I forget how many they made, 600-700 of those. But we're looking at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, about 14,000, 15,000 fighters that were actually made by Nakajima, and with the Hayabusa being probably the most produced. Although I think the K-8 84 was probably their best one. Although I understand the Ki-44, which was quite a late war, was actually a really good airplane. And people forget Kawasaki made fighters also. And they had a hit with their Ki-61, which had their copy of a Messerschmitt Daimler-Benz DV601 engines, why it looks like a Messerschmitt. But they stuck a radial on it and with the Ki-100 as a stopgap, and turned out to be better than the Ki-61. They later put a bubble canopy on it, which is one of the airplanes I built on a road build. That's how I kind of got refreshed on it. I didn't make that many of them because it was near the end of the war. But the irony is that the very best fighter the Japanese fielded was slinging a propeller by and I mean even the Americans and the British and the Japanese and everyone else admitted this, is the on the lower left, the Kawanishi George. They only made 1,500 of them. But apparently, the N1K, and they made, if it had floats on it, it was called the Rex. But if it was a land-based version, it was the George. But everybody said that is absolutely the best piston engine fighter the Japanese produced during the war. And that's the color photo on the lower left. One of the reasons it gets hard to tell Japanese aircraft apart is they all have similar profiles. Almost all of them are radial engine, bubble canopy tail draggers, and with the same basic layout. So that's why, you know, people reporting so many zeros, they would see a Nakajima or something and just call it a zero. A lot of times, in the heat of combat, you weren't going to tell the difference. And one of the other things the Japanese did that was very smart is you'll notice all of these airplanes have a wide track landing gear. And as Ray just pointed out, some of them you could confuse with the Focke-Wulf 190. They do have that profile. They were very intelligent designs. The problem they were running into is material shortages. One of the reasons, if you look at that KI-44 in the center, one of the reasons that so much of the paint was missing, as we discussed earlier, was that one of you guys that had written me about this was that they were running out of everything, including the primer, the zinc chromate, and everything else. They were just putting raw paint on the metal, which didn't adhere very well. And also, they were running out. The factories had all been bombed, so they couldn't get decent paint. So the paint they were using was extremely low quality, which is why so much of it flaked off. And it was one of those situations, wartime necessity. But what I find impressive was that if you went into combat in the last 3 years of the war, statistically speaking, you had a better from 40, I would say 43 on, or late 42 for that matter, you had a much better chance of running into one of these other aircraft than you did a Zero. But of course, at the end of the war, Zeros, which had long lost their edge despite all the upgrades, they were being used as kamikaze aircraft, strapping a bomb on them. But the George bagged quite a few Corsairs and other stuff, so it was absolutely not a plane to trifle with. And people on all sides, Japanese, American, and I think even some Brits that might have test flown it, really thought that it was the finest dogfighter in the Pacific Theater, possibly in the war. So, too little too late, but lucky for us in the U.S. Or on the Allied side, or our grandparents. But, give the Japanese their due. They had world-class engineers that made some very fine fighting machines that, sadly, unless you're a real aviation buff, kind of lost to history. They're just not part of the, people have busy lives, but it's just sad that from a historical standpoint that people don't appreciate that Nakajima actually made more fighters, and most likely you'd run into a Nakajima. So that was just something I thought was kind of a cool thing. And that was, I think, really all that I had planned on my end. So, guys, what's up? Let me just stick something up here to have. Oh, you know what? Did I turn off the desk cam again? Just use that for some filler. Chuck points out that they were running out of pilots. Yeah, they were. In fact, they were also running out of fuel to train pilots. One of the biggest problems I believe that they had was that even the guys who were the reasons kamikazes, if some fighter pilot jumped on one, I mean, they barely know how to turn the airplane. Never mind aerobatics. Kamikaze, although they wasted a lot of airplanes, they were running out of fuel and everything else. In fact, the biggest kamikaze of the war wasn't even an airplane. You guys remember they sent the was it the Musashi, that oversized battle wagon? They had it in the Yamato, and I was at Operation Tengo. They basically sent it on a one-way mission. Didn't even have enough fuel to get back. Better to die gloriously in battle, how Klingon. I also got asked recently what color I painted the inside of the Buffalo. This brings up a research issue. I know a lot of you guys research your models when you build them because you want them to look right. When I did my Vindicator, the only pictures I could find were in black and white, and I that doesn't tell you what color it is. But I did find some pictures from the Naval Air Museum where they have the world's only remaining Vindicator, and it had basically a light gray sort of metal interior color. And the Buffalo, though, the few pictures I found, it looked like they had the zinc chromate. So I used zinc chromate for the interior of the cockpit, and there seems to be a lot of debate because there's not a lot of consistency. And I don't get too uptight about the insides of the airplane normally because you can't see it. I'm actually, when I start working on I'm going to keep building these World War I airplanes for a little while, and I have those really nice ones that were the Edward kits, and I'm thinking about maybe, like I talked about the Felix stuff, if they come with these hyper detailed cockpits, all these little metal parts that you're not going to be able to see once the airplane's built, then I may build the cockpit and put it outside the airplane with the pilot in it as a side display, and where you can actually see. And then it's going to be a little more important. And when it comes to World War I aircraft, since the new ones that have been remade, built from scratch down in New Zealand, that company's unfortunately stopped doing it because the guy involved was up to shenanigans. But though they do have a lot of pictures of the interior, you actually have a surprisingly good resource, and these guys are fanatical about the details, so I think that's a good source. You can also go to Kermit Week's videos. He's often going to look at his airplanes when they're being built or rebuilt, and I think he's got a D7, might have the original Mercedes in it, engine, and they've got the skin off, and he's up in the cockpit in one of the videos, and you actually see everything. So there's a great detail guide for you. The internet has so upped the game on model building. And I was looking at that 91 issue of Fine Scale Modeler that was just sent to me, and you look at the models in there, and they seem so, I'll use the word basic, compared to the stuff you're seeing now, because there's so much information available. And one of the tricks that I learned that worked really well was when painting the exterior, was to put some salt, put silver tin color, like I think Smitty was just talking about. Put some tin color, let that harden, maybe clear coat it, then put some salt on it, and just wet the salt and put it on there. And I mean, don't get so wet that it dissolves, but just enough that'll stick. Then airbrush it with your zinc chromate and then with your other paint, and then just brush the salt off, and it'll pop off, and it leaves these beautiful little stipples, like paint is flaked off. And sometimes, and maybe put a little over the zinc chromate too, because that way you get some of them that show the bare metal, and maybe some that show just a touch of zinc chromate. Really adds a nice effect to it if you want to get that in it. And like I say, I wouldn't. Now, something like a Heinkel 111, where you got that gigantic glazed nose and you're going to see all the detail. One of the reasons I did the whole snow frosted glass diorama with my Lindbergh Heinkel 111 was there's virtually no detail. There was a seat and a little yoke, and that was the entire internal detail of the cockpit. You know, yay Lindbergh, going that extra mile. But when you and it didn't have any crew members either. So I mean, I had people in my spare stash I could have stuck in there. But the point is that it's like, even if I put crew in there, you'd essentially have to completely scratch build the interior, and I wasn't going to do that. So I was like, fine, we'll just, when all else fails, cover it up. So I decided to put in that snow scene with the glass all frosted over, simply because there was no detail. So yeah, sometimes the inside really does matter. If you're going to build a open cockpit biplane with no pilot, then it starts to matter, because people can just look in there. And it just breaks my heart. That's why Dreamberry Daryl and I did the song Details on the Inside. It kind of breaks my heart to see these people do these fantastic interiors, and we build a model, you can't see any of it. And so fun masking the HG-111 canopy. Yeah, what's that little cartoon? It says Modeler's Hell, and there's two doors, and one is looking for parts in the carpet, and the other one is masking 1/72 scale canopies. I've gotten in the habit of just hand painting them with acrylic, so that I can just use a toothpick to etch off anything that gets out of place. And given that it's 1/72 scale, it works okay, at least to my eyes. Remember, this is my philosophy, and I try to push this so that people don't feel compelled to make themselves miserable. Build to your standard. It's your model. Do with it what you want. Yeah, we all want to make a nice kit. But by all means, don't. This is supposed to be a hobby. Don't drive yourself crazy, trying to get these details that no one's ever going to appreciate, unless you want to do it just for your own edification. In which case, model on. Godspeed to you. I have nothing but respect for people who can do that level of detail and have the patience. Once in a while, like with the Felix Stowe or the Vindicator, I'll slow down, make myself slow down, and I'm happy with it. But good philosophy. Um, yeah, what Trey's was or Smitty was just talking about. I've talked to people who were on a piece of equipment to ask them about it. It's amazing what they remember and what they don't remember. And I asked them what color was it. I don't know, kid. I was just there to fix the thing. They weren't taking mental notes at the time. But something they had to work on extensively, they'll remember in detail. Oh yeah, I had to do the engine run up on the F4, and always terrified me that thing was gonna, lose its chocks to take off. So I'd push it up till the, such gauge, E per gauge read this, and they can remember those numbers. But you ask, what color was the floor? Oh. So, it's all where your focus is at. And the one thing you have to tell yourself if things get a little out of hand, or it's like with my little Berthold build here, and I get in the little wing decal on, they're facing the wrong way. I was like, oh, how did I miss that? And I was like, oh well, I know, now you know. The Republic is still here. The universe is not imploded. There are no black holes. So it's just a matter of I'm probably going to do a little touch up on this model, just a few little blemishes that I've seen that, just for my own edification. And that's what it's all about, is what makes me happy. And but you're looking at a guy that's perfectly happy to put a Casper on the shelf, and ooh, look what I did. And here's the part that's the irony. The Casper, no glue smears. This one, big ass thumbprint I had to file down. Ain't that the way? By the time I'm building the third one, I'm pretty much doing. Oh, by the way, if you build these little D7 kits, word of warning, not that someone like myself, who's been building models for decades and built these as a kid, and would ever fail to read in detail the exploded diagram instructions because he thinks he knows how to build the model without it. Not that I would ever do that. But the V Cabane, let me push this here where you can see it. The little V Cabane strut right up here is almost identical to the V-shaped landing gear strut. And it would be painful easy for someone who wasn't paying attention to try to put the landing gear up here and the Cabane strut on the landing gear. Not that that happened. Or didn't. Maybe. And had to go back and actually read the part number and then figure out which end went which way. And then said, you know what, on this next one, maybe I'll just read the bloody instructions. So I'm not saying that that happened. I'm just saying it could. So, note to self. Even if it's a kit you built as a kid, even if it's only got 10 or 12 parts, might want to give that exploded diagram a breeze and check those part numbers just in case. Amazing how some of these parts, they're not symmetrical. They're side specific, and it depends. One's got to go in the forward position, one's got to go in the rear position. There's only one right way to put them on, and they're deceptively easy to confuse. Not that that happened, but they are. And Michael says that his dad was an apprentice mold maker. Man, I can only imagine how they made those molds back then. The level of precision you're dealing about. And when I build these old LS kits and Sanwa kits and things, especially the LS kits, I'm trying to remember when these things were designed. Barney Fife was patrolling the streets of Mayberry. Okay, cars still had little tiny tail fins on them, and yet the molds are fantastic. This was not the day of laser cutting or CNC anything. It was all done by hand. And whether it was a pantograph or how they were doing it, I don't know. But just the and they're not exactly dealing in a pliable medium. I mean, you're cutting steel. So I just I stay. You look at all the tiny little rivets and everything. Good God Almighty, it's impressive. It's just genuinely impressive. Though it was true artisanship. Hey Joe. So again, since the Joe from New York just checked in, I'll just remind you guys, if you're in New York City and Manhattan, make sure to get down to the Red Caboose. Throw one more toss out there, and I tell you what, real quick, guys, if anybody here's been to the Red Caboose, just give me a yes or a quick reply. None of us have ever put a part on backwards before. It's impossible. Drinking a little diet peach tea. I'm having to cut out the carbonated stuff. Yeah, William points out that we built the SR-71 and sent the men to the moon on slide rolls, which is true. And some people feel that the 1960s, which it doesn't surprise me that would coincide with the peak of model building, was when the U.S. was probably at its manufacturing zenith. And one of the things is a lot of those molds were not made out of steel. They were made out of oh crap, I'm brain farting on the material, but it's a semi-precious metal that turned out to be toxic. Oh gosh, it'll come to me here in just a second. Not rhodium. Man, it's not like I haven't done a half dozen documentaries covering this very basic thing. But the beryllium copper. And it's a semi-precious metal. And as you guys are probably well aware, and this has been brought up in several little documentaries online that people have done and things I've read, was that the Hanley over at Johan, he had beryllium copper. That's correct. He had issues with some employees. Morale was not high. Some of his molds disappeared, and they're pretty sure that beryllium copper made it out in a lunchbox to some local scrapper. And oh, by the way, I know, just to refresh, because people are asking me about this. Remember, we're talking about the inserts that go into the mold frame, not the big mold frame itself. Those things are 800 pounds. Nobody's toting that out. King Kong's not taking that out in his lunchbox. But the inserts are designed to come out because the frames have to be able to be reused. So there you go. And it's pretty well established that that's what happened. Not anybody knows who did it, just that some employees did it. And titanium is if you could let me ask you a question. I already know what mine is, and I'll just tell you before I start. It's a Luscombe 80, which is a small 2-seat airplane that I learned to fly in. If you could make a kit that's not currently in production, and I know some of you are going to put down modern truck kits, what kit would you like to see made that's not being made? And I've had a lot of people ask if anybody makes these specific models like Toyota pickups and stuff, and they don't. Not even in Japan. I'm surprised at how many as many cars and trucks are out there. How many of them, especially more modern ones or ones from, say, the 80s to now, there's no model of them. People love the old stuff, and they love the real new stuff, but there's a 3 or 4 decade era in there that's a real dearth of, real shortage of kits available for them. Oh, they make the Ferry Rotodyne. In fact, I think Atlantis put it back in production. Rotodyne, man, there was a concept that they should have proceeded with. A lot of people talk about the noise they made being the reason it was canceled. I don't think that's true. There's a lot of people thought there was actually a lot of political pressure to put that out of operation for other reasons. That actually had a lot of potential, which is now the V2, basically the V22 Osprey. By the way, guys, speaking of the Osprey, you may at some point, the FAA is issuing type ratings, which are called powered lift, which are tilt rotors. And you may actually see some commuter airlines with Ospreys at some point in the future, because now a couple of smaller versions are coming out, or maybe some corporate aircraft. So I think the tilt rotor at your local airport may be a thing here in a while. So just there's that. Oh, the 70. See, there you go. 78 Chrysler Cordoba. That's not something you hear too many people screaming for. No one makes a model of the Trabant? The Trebi? I find that interesting. I thought at least a East European company would make one. Somebody hop on ScaleMates and see if anybody makes a model of the Trebi, the Trabant. I can't believe that no one makes that. Car's way too. Man, the East Germans, they live for that thing. Yeah, a 10 of Claire's asking about some Humbrol Gloss USEF Insignia Blue. I have some Insignia Blue, but it's Model Master. I also got asked a lot about why Testers or Rust-Oleum is putting some of the paints out of production, and I'm pretty sure it's just a resource allocation issue. They look at their numbers when they're making tens of millions a month, and they see this dinky little thing on the side and get, that's a waste of time. I believe they'll still be making the little model paints, but I'm sure a company like that has a threshold at which point they just go, this just isn't worth it. What I wish they would do is spin it off to somebody else, but then again, they don't want the competition, so probably not. And yeah, then the problem is, you can be scale specific. Let's say you've got a kit that they make, but not in the scale you want. That's another good one. To be honest, I'm really surprised there aren't more HO scale models out there, given how passionate model railroaders are. I mean, we all know there are a lot of HO accessories, but I'm just surprised there aren't more kit models in HO. I know the aircraft like now it used to be Hawk, now it's the Glencoe Viscount. That it's a little off scale, but not enough that you notice. You could put it on it. I actually thought about putting one on my train layout when I had one. Okay, the Trabant 601 Kubel Modell Schmeda-Struppen 1 to 35th scale. Okay. I was pretty sure somebody was making one. The Shelby GLH Charger, there you go. And has anybody here ever built a model of the Daytona Charger or the what was the Plymouth, the Roadrunner, the one they call it the car that killed NASCAR, because those things with the Hemis in them were so freaking hot they couldn't keep them on the track, and that's when the Daytona guys decided they had to start putting restrictor plates and things like that in them so they could only go so fast. And just I'm sure most of you guys have heard about a very famous mechanic / driver, really more famous for being a mechanic, but also as a driver, named Smokey Eunuch, whose motto was, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying, and who personally claims to be the reason about half the NASCAR regulations exist. But the famous basketball trick, or I think it was a basketball or volleyball. For those who don't know, the bird, that was it. Yeah. The Superbird, that was it. Superbird. Plymouth Superbird. Thank you. Eunuch, I forget what the size of the gas tank. NASCAR had this thing saying a gas tank could only be so big, and they'd fill it and watch how much fuel went in until it topped off. So he made an oversized fuel tank and put a deflated or inflated basketball or something in there, and they filled it up, and okay, there's your 20 gallons, it's good. And when they left, he deflated the ball and pulled it out, put another 5 gallons in. But the other thing he did was his fuel line was like 2 inches in diameter and held like 5 gallons by itself. But you see, this is the thing that kind of bothers me. The whole idea of NASCAR was to race and to have the best car and the fastest car and all that stuff. The problem with all the in my humble opinion, one of the reasons I don't watch NASCAR, I don't care about it, is because if you want to make a guy get a stock car off the showroom floor, he gets to pull out the seats, put in a roll cage, but he's got to drive it pretty much as he came off the showroom floor. Fine, that's the real deal. If he's just got to use the powertrain, the engine, the frame, okay, that's fine. But if he's learning tricks like oversized gas tanks and stuff, I just don't see that as cheating. That's just initiative. And don't forget, he's carrying that extra weight, which makes the car that much harder to handle under certain circumstances. If he can put lead in it someplace to weight it down where it rides better, the whole idea behind things like NASCAR was to not only to race, but also to innovate. And you stifle innovation by making everybody basically make the same car. And Oh, he ran. I didn't know he put fuel on the roll cages. Woohoo! Firebomb. Uh, so I don't know. It's just I like the idea of letting these guys are creative and aggressive and engineering minds go and just let them see what they can do. And you know what? If they lose it and blow up on the wall, they knew what they were doing. I mean, they're grown ups. So yeah, that's just my humble opinion. I think racing, I can understand in certain things where, like Formula One, where it's literally in the name Formula One. We have this very tight set of specific rules because that's what makes our car our car. Yeah, okay, that I totally understand. But NASCAR needs to just have like an unlimited class and something where the judges, okay, as long as it doesn't blow up going down the track. And you'd see some real monsters. Of course, they're worried, well, the track can't handle these speeds. Well, maybe if you let these guys engineer, they could come up for a cure for that. Heck, you might have cars with like airplane components on them, like wings and stuff to help them, fly around the corners. It works with the speedboats. Every once in a while we see them, whee! And but if you're gonna race. But and don't tell me you didn't see Death Race 2000 and think that was, hey, that's a sport I'd watch on pay-per-view. And maybe that's what we need, an entirely new kind of racing. You have to do it out in the desert, but yeah. It would be interesting to see what would happen in all these races if they would just take the handcuffs off and let the fertile minds of the engineers and the drivers do their thing, take their chances. But I understand NASCAR is actually having trouble with sales these days. Also, they're not doing so hot. They were really exploding for a while, but they're having and this goes before the pandemic or anything. Of course, I'd like. Yeah. For those, Slugo was talking about the operator headspace and timing. For those who don't catch the reference, that dates back to the old, not dates back, it's an old military thing, reference the old 50 caliber machine guns, particularly the M2. If you've never had the joy to fire a 50 caliber, it's an experience you won't forget. It's basically an automatic cannon, but when the gun comes in two major components, the receiver mechanism and the barrel. The barrel has to be screwed into place, and the unwritten rule is that when you lock it into place, goes all the way, you back off 2 clicks. Well, then you have to open up the feed cover, and there is a gap tool, and you have to stick it in the headspace. And if you don't have the headspace adjusted just right, the gun won't work properly. And so thus the phrase operator headspace and timing. Then there's also, of course, some people say it's actually more of a mechanical thing, comes from the timing and headspace on a car. Military vehicles, but I've heard both. I really don't know where the phrase comes from, but since we used a lot in the infantry, everybody said it came from the old 50 cal. And the mechanics of the gun have to be set up so the timing is correct. 50 calibers actually tend to jam a lot if you don't have the timing set up just right. Well, actually, any machine gun or any machine will. But that's where operator headspace and timing. Duh. And I never made that mistake again. So. But getting back to the models, so right now with all the World War I stuff and also the Japanese Zero stuff, I almost brought the Hasegawa and the Tamiya roof in here so we could compare them in real time, but I realized there's too much chance of losing some parts in the carpet or something. But I do want to do a comparison between, since I have both a Hasegawa roof and a Tamiya roof, and I've built the Tamiya roof once already, and I want to compare those two, maybe do a side-by-side build or something. It's been my experience that both of them are top-tier companies, although sometimes Hasegawa is actually more expensive. So far, my experience has been that the Tamiya kits tend to be a little bit better engineered from the point of how they go together. They seem to have less argument than Hasegawa kits do. And I don't know if you guys have had that experience with them or not, but The I was just watching on forget which channel it was. Somebody was doing it. Actually popped into my Yahoo feed. I was gifted that big 1/48 scale Tamiya Phantom, and somebody happened to be building it, so I thought I would look and see it. And he was very impressed with the kit. But during his build, he was talking about how well engineered the how well engineered the Tamiya kit was as far as for the builder. And it's been my experience that Hasegawa sometimes they design it with the attitude, if this part goes here, it's your problem how you get it in there. And um, oh, by the way, for all the Canadians watching, happy Canada Day. For those who don't know, I just thought I was watching. I love what's his name, Wendover, the guy who does Wendover, Sam, who does Wendover Productions, and he does these half as interesting little short videos. And he did one on Moving Day up in Canada. He was talking about Montreal, and apparently, for reasons he got into, 15% of Montreal moves on one day out of the year, which goes back to a law that dates 100 years back or whatever. And I just thought that was it's go watch the video. Apparently the it goes back to when in Canada had a law you couldn't evict people during the winter because otherwise they die in the cold, so had to wait to a certain date. So that's just become like when everybody moves. I was just thinking, if because it was just Canada Day, if I had to move with all the stuff I've got and all these models and everything, I'd go nuts. I'm pretty much stuck in this house until I die, which is good because I like it here. Anshalak is asking about Zuekimura. It's funny you should mention their 1/32 scale HS 129 because I was actually preparing a company history on Zuekimura, which is a new company, fairly new company, and I contacted them about using some of the images because they are probably the only company that's beyond wingnut wings for interior detail. They have like wing ribs and fuel tanks and things. I'm like, you're never going to see this unless you like make it with a chunk of wing missing or make it as an exploded model or something. The level of internal detail and the quality of those models is the only thing I've seen that's beyond what I've got a new phrase, wingnut wings insane. And the one it was I think it was it's the 129's little twin engine ground attack plane. That's what they were doing. I was flabbergasted by the quality. They are real expensive, understandably, but unfortunately, the people contacted me and said that I did not have permission to use any of the images. That the company was based in Japan. That none of the images could be used without their consent. You had to copyright corporate, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I'll just skip this one. I'm not getting in trouble over that. And they haven't been around very long, but they're a niche company, but their niche is the closest thing to perfection we've seen in models. And if you haven't gone and just seen some of their videos, I'd say go look at them because they are right up there with wingnut wings from what I saw on video. But they actually include things, they actually go beyond because the cockpit detail is incredible. Okay, great. But they go way beyond all that. They get into, like I say, they actually have a complete fuel tank that you can put inside the wing. I'm like, why? I mean, if you're going to do a diorama, the mechanic work on the fuel tank, you got the wing, sure. But if you're just going to build the model in toto and put it on the shelf, you're going to have a box full of parts you don't need. It's incredible. I mean, they actually have the wing ribs and things. This isn't it's almost like making a wooden model out of plastic because it has all of these, and it has the wing skins and everything like. Blah, 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 blah. Trays, I can believe. Trays, have you built one of their models? One of the Zuikimura models? I don't even know anybody who's built one. I've just what I've seen on the online. But and I understand, you know, their attitude of you don't have permission because you're dealing with some backwater YouTuber. You never know what I'm going to say, and they're like, hey, look, you know, we took actually who I contacted was the person who had the rights to the photos that they use. I never actually contacted the company itself, so I may still do a bio on them someday. But if I do, it'll probably be very short. They've been around that long. In fact, pretty much already said everything I could possibly say about them, and that and a list of their kits. I also wanted to do, gosh, I've been sitting on the one on Max, Peerless Max, and Schreiber Max, which are basically all branches of the same company. They only made like a dozen land vehicles for a while, apparently very high quality from what I understand. I've never built one, but then they just kind of disappeared, and I don't know, but they had a different name in every country they went to. I think it was, I want to say it was Peerless Max, Schreiber Max in Germany, Peerless Max in the UK, and Max in the US, or something like that. I forget. But anyway. No problem, Hoot Owl. So, by the way, one other thing I was thinking about was, I'm going out on a 4-day trip tomorrow, but I'm going to be down in the Caribbean, and I don't think I'm going to be. I mean, I might take a model with me, but I unfortunately don't expect any content. My schedule's kind of messed up on this trip. In fact, I'm going to be a little hard pressed to get much out this month. My days off, I'll still be out in the Tarbis making stuff and making videos, but have other things going on too. So July is probably not going to be my most productive month. Oh God, I hope not a hurricane. No, it just has more to do with things going on out in the real world here, and work itself, and some training events and stuff like that. You know, you're right. I actually have those 2 Edward World War I kits on the short list. All those kits I stacked up on the side of the Tarbis, all the Japanese models, the race plane models, and the World War I models, make up the bulk of the short stack. Those and the Caterham. I read those books that were sent to me on the TV show The Prisoner, number 6, and I'm sure most of you guys, if you're watching this channel, you're probably familiar with the TV show The Prisoner, which personally I think is, you know, it's whatever you want it to be. In my mind, it's an allegory that this whole story's taking place in his head. I think it's definitely a follow-on to Secret Agent Man or Danger Man, depending on where you saw it. Same actor, same. I mean, the link between the two is too strong. I think Danger Man got hit on the head too hard, and the rest of this is just sort of something that existed in his head. But the now a model like the Caterham is one that I will definitely take the time to put in as many details as I can. It's the kind of model I would probably display with the hood open, and partly because of the scale, partly because of the detail, the popularity, and it's based off the Super Lotus. And in fact, the book they were talking about the 3 cars that were used and everything, and the trouble they had locating them and everything. But even the number car, you know, kind of presaging kit and car there a little bit. But down to there's this internet following of the prisoner's car, the Super Lotus or Lotus 7, that gets right down to the different tag numbers. There's an entire YouTube or websites dedicated to where the cars ended up and where they're at now, and one of them was destroyed. For those who don't know, of the 3 cars that were used in filming The Prisoner, the primary hero car, by the way, they were going to give him a different car. It was a different kind of Lotus. It was a Lotus Elan, which is what some other spy show was using. I forget, it was Simon Templar in the Saint, or who it was. But anyway, it was McGowan that decided to go with the Lotus. And probably the single most famous Lotus ever made. But apparently, after the show's production, they had leased the cars from owners, and one of them sold it to a guy in Brazil who took it to Brazil and used it for racing, amateur racing, and wound up totaling it out. And it was that's right, it was what Mrs. Peel drove. And I believe that was the Lotus. I believe it was the Lotus Elan, I believe. And I was trying to remember. I knew it was another spy show, but I forget what Simon Templar drove in the Saint. Probably a Maserati or something. There was a short-lived TV show. It was like a summer fill-in series, and it was weird because it had Tony Curtis and I believe it was Roger Moore. And I think it was called the Persuaders or Partners or something like that. And Tony Curtis was driving a Ferrari. I remember that because I remember saying, "Hey, there's no way all three of us will fit in the Ferrari." And Roger Moore was driving a larger British sports car. Might have been a Jaguar, but it was you saying Roger Moore was driving a Volvo P1500? Oh crap! Now I got to know what that show was. All right, time for the interweb. You guys, let's see. Real quick, put in Tony Curtis, Roger Moore TV show, and I'll bet it'll tell you the name of the show. I want to say it was The Persuaders. Oh, Simon Templar drove a Volvo P18. Okay. All right. Those would make a couple interesting cars. I remember it was weird that two movie stars would be doing a television show. And, oh yeah, and Maxwell Smart in his Sunbeam Tiger. It's a pretty spiffy little car, actually. And, okay, somebody already found it. Moore drove an Aston Martin in the Persuaders. Okay. I just remember it had a more of a sedan-y look than the Curtis's Ferrari, which I didn't appreciate how small a Ferrari was until I saw Tony Curtis get out of one. Wow, he's not the biggest guy on earth either. Somebody says that Smart was driving a Datsun Roadster. Okay, I'm going to let you guys slug that one out because I don't know. I'm sure somebody is probably burning up the keyboards of the internet right now. And the Tiger had a Ford V8. So did the, the Pantera? I believe it had a Ford V8. Cars like the Pantera, I saw a Pantera when I was a kid and fell in love with it, and I still think it was one of the sexiest looking cars ever made to this day. They're still god-awful expensive than the Mangusta. And part of the reason for that is because it made sense, though, put an American engine in an exotic-looking car, and that way parts and everything become a lot easier to get. Okay, so it was a Tiger. Okay, Garfield Tabby brings up Grandpa Munster and Dragula. I know I've talked about this before, but you guys know that Dragula and the Munster coach were both Tom Daniel designs. Same Tom Daniel that made my Rommel's Rod up here. Now, mind you, he just came up with the concept for the cars and drew up, but he drove it. He drew all that up for Barris, and Barris never gave him any credit for it. It's rare that you see it's a TD design, but Dragula and the Munster coach were both Tom Daniel designs. Okay, so here we go. Smart started with a Sunbeam and went to a Datsun. There we go. I did not realize that Tim Horton was killed driving a De Tomaso Pantera. Speaking of, well, not Horton, but Horner, you guys know that James Horner, the famous musician, Titanic, and The Rocketeer, and so many other wonderful Hollywood themes, was killed with his instructor flying a turboprop single-engine military aerobatic trainer. And no one's entirely sure what happened, but I think they were doing aerobatics and it got away from them. I don't think it wasn't a Texan 2. It was and it wasn't a T-34. Oh, what's that hot single engine turboprop? I think they use it in Europe and South America as a trainer. Forget off the top of my head, but airplanes will bite you just like cars. All right, everybody's putting their okay. Time for your favorite TV car, and a condo just said the Rockford Firebird, which is a cool car. Which, by the way, somebody I think on VinWiki did covered that car. It went from some collector found it, and although it was primarily a stock car, there were modifications made because of the power that was needed to run the sound and video equipment and everything. And I think it was on the left side armrest or something. They pulled some stuff off and put some attachments there so they could plug in and get some juice for like the audio gear and everything. Pilatus, that was it. Pilatus, yeah. Tucano. It was a Tucano. Okay. It was one of those two, Pilatus or Tucano. But those things are hot. You know, the American Trainer's a copy of the Pilatus, so it's. I saw one of them flying. I thought it was a Mustang at first glance. Those puppies move. They even have an auto rudder in them because they're training guys to fly jets. And jets don't have any torque. You jam the throttle forward, you don't get in that P factor or torque of that swinging propeller. So to train the guys for jets, it has an auto rudder in it. When you firewall the throttle, the rudder automatically is applied so that it's like flying a jet. And that little sucker moves too. And full ejection seats, the works. The Mod Squad Woody. Coyote. Oh, Steed's Bentley, Rockford's Firebird. Yeah, you guys have got some great choices in there. I know it's cliche, but I think I'm going to go with the Monkeys Mobile. I've always loved that. And that was not a Barris car. That was Dean. God, why do I always forget his name? That's. Yeah, generally that's a good. I actually have some video of me sitting in or my first officer sitting in the remake of a. I'm with you, Amano. The Monkey Mobile. The Bluesmobile, a Monaco. I mean, you can't. Thanks to that movie, you can't find what is a '74 Monaco anywhere. Dean Jeffries. Wait a minute. Isn't Dean Jeffries? Isn't that the guy who did like the Jeffries tubes and Star Trek? That's a different. Time for the interweb. God, I'm so embarrassed. How do I not know this off the top of my head? You may be right. All right. Oh boy, this is what happens when I try to type without the correct glasses. Yep, Dean Jeffries. Okay. Somebody's probably already corrected me by now. Matt Jeffries. Thank you. God. Matt Jeffries and Dean Jeffries, two great designers. Matt Jeffries designed the starships and everything for Star Trek. Dean Jeffries did the cars. Oh, the shame, the embarrassment. Oh, humiliation. I have literally lost face. So, but I'm going to go with the Monkeys Mobile. Although, according to Mike Nesmith, the thing drove like absolute crap. And the big header on it was purely for display, the big intake. But I know that there's really not a nice way to put it. There was no love lost between Dean Jeffries and Barris, because Barris is a businessman who owned a shop, but apparently, according to Jeffries, he didn't know a screwdriver from a hammer. He was purely a businessman, but he knew how to self-promote. You know, he's posed with the cars, put his name on them, but it's actually his guys in his shop, and guys like TD that would design them, and guys in his shop that would build them, but he ran the business, so ta-da! And I don't think, I'm not familiar with any relationship between Dean and Matt Jeffries, but I have no idea either. Although I do believe Matt Jeffries was somewhat older. So that's as far as I'll go with that, because I don't want to get any hate mail. So, let's see. Okay, we only got a few minutes left here. I'm going to have to bug out. I have a family function. Since I got to work on the 4th of July, the family's doing the thing today. And at least we have better weather. Yesterday it was raining all day long. It looks like we'll have some decent weather today, hopefully tomorrow. Cassandra Peterson, Elvira, and somebody made a model. I think it's what was that company out in California made a model of her. Oh my gosh, I'm slipping gears. I'm gonna go watch my own videos and catch back up. Cassandra Peterson, who plays Elvira, who, by the way, just as from reading her wiki page, apparently she got scalded when she was a child, got some pretty nasty scars, and the reason her costume is the way it is because it conceals all that. And it's sad. She seems like a nice person. Hate to see someone get hurt. No worries, guys. No worries, Jeff. We're a few more minutes and I'm going to have to bug out, but I'll leave the comment thread up for a few minutes just in case you guys want to chat with each other for a little bit. And I didn't realize Elvira had a T-Bird, unless that was the one from... Was that the one from the movie? You're talking about that one that was a convertible, wasn't it? There's a lot of cool cars out there. My favorite car, like if somebody said have one to drive, there's no question in my mind, the supernatural baby, the Impala. But to have one just for like as a collector car, it would be the Monkey's Mobile. If there was a car out there that I was going to have to use as a daily driver, I'm more into comfort than anything else. That's one. The Rockford Firebird wouldn't be a bad one. Nice straight up car. Actually, I think I preferred Rocky's pickup truck. If you guys remember, his dad always drove a pickup truck. Take off, Herman. We'll see you later, man. Mobius, thank you. Oh my gosh. I really need to start watching my own videos. It's kind of like when I research these videos, get all the scripts written and everything, and get it all read and get it done. By the time then I go to the next one, and you have to I'm getting to that age where I have to purge old data to make room for new data. I think my hard drive's full. Herbie the Love Bug. I remember that kit, seeing that. I remember seeing the original Herbie the Love Bug movie with Dean Jones at the movie theater, and Buddy Hackett, and I think it was wasn't Terry Thomas playing their arch rival. It was Bernard Fox. Dr. Bombay calling Dr. Bombay. The Goose is Kawasaki from the movie Mad Max. There's picking an obscure one. Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. You guys remember TV shows like Barnaby Jones and Ken, and the private detectives always drove these big gunboats. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Uh, I had a 43 Willis Jeep, just like the ones in Rat Patrol. And at my size, it was made for a man from the 1940s or 1930s, because at my size, I could barely squeeze in. The seats don't adjust. And when I would watch, even as a kid, I knew those were American half tracks and mocked up American vehicles. What I didn't realize, they went to Spain to shoot a lot of it, because I didn't realize how much money they dumped in that TV show, The Rat Patrol, to get it made. And it's funny, she didn't last, one or two seasons, and it pissed off a lot of Brits, understandably, a lot of people in the UK, understandably, because basically they'd taken the story of the SAS and given it to a couple of Americans in Jeeps, so they threw in Moffat as sort of a peace offering, I guess. They had a little realism, but they're supposed to just be an American recon squad, long range reconnaissance squad, but I did a little checking, and although the British did have groups like that, pretty much the Americans didn't. So I really think if you wanted to remake the Rat Patrol, it should be a British production, and it should be more accurate to the truth, because the stories are so incredible, they don't need any embellishment. The SAS was and is a really impressive organization. Just catching up a couple of the comments. Okay, 52. Got a few minutes left here. I take it there's a soccer game, or as they call it, football game going on somewhere. Oh, since Lance brings up Hans Gudegast, who's now Eric Braden, who is my sister-in-law's favorite soapbox star. She thinks he's dreamy. And uh, that's one thing they did that was really good, though, is they cast a German as a German. And well, Paul, you're right about them adding all the equipment, adding some legitimacy to it, but there's something that's missing on those Jeeps. Uh, One thing, well, this is, I don't know if it was the SAS or the Americans that came up with this, but the SAS adopted it. And I learned this having that old Jeep. You know, those old radiators from the 40s, you know, they're good, they work, but they don't have a super airtight seal. I mean, it's 40s technology. And out there in the desert, they would tend to lose coolant over time, just through normal evaporative process getting out of the radiator. So what they did was is they put a condenser on the grill and ran a tube so that steam that would escape, they ran to the radiator so that the gases, the steam that would escape, would actually go back in the condenser, condense back in water, and they could pour it back into the radiator, because obviously water was as valuable as gasoline. And the other thing was is to lighten the Jeep. They did everything they could lighten the Jeeps. They took the windshields off of them. They didn't need those. They weren't going fast enough. They even cut out several. The original Ford or the Ford GPW or Willis MB had a 9-slat grill, and they would cut out about 7 of the slats and just throw the steel away because it was anything they could to reduce to weight. They also put tiny little red running lights underneath the rear wheels, up in the wheel wells, and that way they didn't have to use the tail lights, but you could follow the guy in front of you from this little tiny red glow in the pitch dark, but nobody in front could see it, so they didn't give them away. They had all kinds of tricks they pulled with those Jeeps. They did mount 50 cals on them, and also a lot of the SS had twin Lewis guns on them. So that part, you know, being full of gas and everything and hanging all the gear off of that part is correct. But they really bogged those things down, and I don't think they ever carried more than 2 guys in a Jeep. There's actually several websites dedicated to the SAS Jeeps, and it wasn't 100% uniform because, you know, the guys were making field modifications. But I think there are a couple of, he's talking about Heller. They did some pretty good stuff, and so that was really good that at least the television show brought that kind of forgotten theater of combat to the public consciousness. And of course, those Wills, you know, jumping over the sand dune. Of course, you guys know that Christopher George, who I believe had been a Marine in real life, that's one reason he had such a military bearing, but he was in a Jeep rollover, and the steering wheel crushed his chest, and he had a heart attack. You know, man was physically fit, but he had a heart attack at like 51 and died. And he was married to an actress, a very beautiful Linda Day George, and he widowed her at an early age. Well, it turned out that when they did the autopsy, they found the scar tissue on his heart, which they're certain came from that Jeep accident. So basically, he was killed filming the Rat Patrol. It just happened years later. And he was one of my favorite actors as a kid. And I can tell you right now, having had a Jeep, first off, they drive better on the grass than they drive on the road with those non-directional tread tires. But I had to tighten up the drag link on mine. The steering wheel was wobbling too much, and I realized it dragged. And it's all very basic and mechanical. I mean, fix it with a screwdriver. But I mean, if I can keep one running, they got to be pretty simple because I am a pilot, not a mechanic. And the fastest way to damage an airplane is to give a pilot a screwdriver. But you can do about 45 on a straightaway, but if you even think you're going to have to turn, man, you really need to slow that thing down. They are top heavy, and they got a narrow wheelbase, and they will flip in a heartbeat. And even in Band of Brothers, they had one of their guys that was killed in a Jeep accident. They're not hard to roll over. And there were 1 or 2 times I scared the snot out of myself driving off-road, making a cut in the wheel and felt it going, whoa, and just cut the wheel back. And I had my niece in a post-war model CJ2 that my brother has, and it's got the big wide knobby tires on it, so it's even more top-heavy. And we got going down the road, and I realized I couldn't get the Jeep up the hill without angling it. You see, they'll go anywhere, but the problem with those things is the sideways. That's when you're, and I actually had her get out and like, you go over there. If anything happens to me, you run and get Dad. And this one has a roll bar. But I was like, I wasn't going to have her in the Jeep when I was trying to get turned around that terrain because I got felt a couple of times it was trying to go over. And you really got to watch yourself in those things. But man, they're cool. I used to get stopped traffic all the time. Everybody called it a truck. That's the thing I didn't get. It's not a truck, it's a Jeep. But oh well. And yeah, I'll tell you something else, though. The SAS had a very tight weeding process on their training because they knew what they were up against. And one of the biggest problems they had is they had to use nautical style navigation because driving across the desert is just like sailing across the ocean. You got to use the stars and compasses and things like that. There is nothing out there to gauge distance with. And you know, T.G. McCoy just brought up a point. He says that his the Pantera was very uncomfortable. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I have never heard of a high-performance sports car. I mean, a genuine high-performance sports car. Lamborghini, Ferrari, Pantera, even some of the C4 Corvettes, which I drove, which I was very uncomfortable in. I've never found one that I would call comfortable. I've never sat in a Lamborghini, but I've heard that the cars are actually not very comfortable. And being a fan of Jay Leno's Garage, I watch a lot of his videos. One of the cars he has that somebody goes, if you could have, a cool car. That old Chrysler 300 he's got impresses me as one I'd like to have because apparently it's an extremely comfortable car, but it's got, like, for its time, it was a hot rod. Big engine, goes fast, drives comfortable. And I thought, that would do. That's a nice compromise. I like sports cars, but I like my comfort even more, and I'm a big guy. So I'm definitely kind of guy that's going to go for the bigger, more luxurious sports car than although I might buy my buddy's Mustang, but that's a convertible, and it's a good deal. I was looking at getting a Cascada, but you can't even find one. And when you do, they're often way overpriced. I looked at a Volvo. I think it was a 2010 Volvo, well, not Volvo, Lexus. The 2010 Lexus convertible is supposed to be their biggest one and has super high ratings. Everybody loves them, but they're all 11 years old, so lucky getting one that doesn't have 100,000 miles on it. So I want my convertible. Well, guys, oh, there you go. Okay, it's you need a bubble horizon. Okay. What's the Christopher Lee in the SAS? I heard he was in the SAS, but I do know a lot of those British actors were in various organizations. Sterling Hayden was in the OSS, and yeah, a lot of those guys had some. I think David Niven might have been in the Commandos. I'm not sure, but I know a lot of those guys had pretty interesting backgrounds. Of course, that was. Oh, he was. Oh, he was in the SAS. Okay. Probably how. Okay. Yeah, I don't call them the greatest generation for nothing. Well, guys, it's time for me to sign off. I have to go do family things. I'll leave the video stream up for a little while. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. This is more of a relaxed one, just to chat and have a good time and catch up. So, like I say, it probably won't be any content for a while. I'll get back when I can, get to work when I can, get cracking on these little models, having a good time, enjoying life, man. Remember, gentlemen, life is short and uncertain, so eat dessert first. Take care of yourselves and model on.